were flooding the earth. The day when the prophecies were coming out of the stove in his house. You see, the huge ship built by the prophet had three different sections. What were the different sections for, Baba? They were for different types of animals, Amir. The first one was for birds, the second part was for the structures. The second part of the structure was for humans, and the third part was for animals. Mashallah, that was brilliant. Yes, my son, and while the day of the flood got near, animals and the birds started arriving one by one. They were arriving in pairs, one male and one female. They were elephants, giraffes, lions, rabbits, parrots, and soon the ship was all kind of varieties of animals and birds from earth. And one day, like God had told the prophet, water suddenly started coming out of the stove in his kitchen. This was a sign Nuh alayhi salam was waiting for. He knew the time of flood had arrived. When he went out, he saw that it had started raining too. Without wasting any time, he ran out and called all the good Muslims who had helped him to build the ship. He asked all of them to board the ship immediately. The disbelievers didn't understand what was going on, so they kept laughing at the prophet. Look, the old fool, they said, what is he going to do with all those animals and men? The prophet ignored them and asked his wives and sons to board the ship quickly. Everyone obeyed him, except for one of his wife and her son, who were not his followers. I will save myself from the water, his son said. Don't worry about me. The water levels had gone up now. So the prophet ran to the board the ship. A terrible flood broke out, and the water level began to rise rapidly. The earth's crust moved, and the ocean floods started rising, which caused it to flood the dry lands. The rains didn't stop for hours either. By now, people realized that what the prophet told them was true, and they ran towards the moment towards a mountain to save themselves. The prophet saw that his wife and son were climbing a mountain to escape from the water, so he shouted to them, come and board the ship, save yourself. But they ignored him and climbed to the top of the mountain. Then a huge wave, bigger than the mountain, they stood on and came and hit them, killing both of them. These enormous waves killed all other disbelievers as well. The water kept rising and rising, and after some time, the earth was completely filled with water. Then Nuh alayhi salam said, Bismillah. When the Prophet uttered these words, the ship started moving. The rains had stopped by now, and the entire earth was filled with water. The Prophet knew he had to keep sailing for a long, long time. But didn't the animals hurt others? How did they live together? The ship had 80 people in it, and the Prophet had taken precautions to store enough food for the men and animals. Allah had it all planned, my son. He had the makeshift suitable for the silent ship as well as the violent iron. All the violent animals were down with some and other sickness. All of them were living together, but the Prophet faced a lot of trouble because of rats. They were everywhere, running up and down, nibbling there, nibbling here. They were really the troublemakers. Then the Prophet prayed to God, and it was that Allah created the cats. The cats hunted down the rats, and after some time, the rats started behaving as well. Like that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala solved many problems that the Prophet had to face during the journey. They had sailed for about 150 days by now, and they couldn't find land anywhere they could see. The Prophet and the man waited and waited for many days. The Prophet then decided to send a crow to see if it could find land anywhere, but the crow didn't return at all. Then the Prophet sent a dove in the search of land. The dove flew away and after a few days returned with a bunch of olive trees in its beaks. The Prophet and his family were really happy, as they knew they were close to the land. The ship sailed further for some time and finally reached on the top of the Jodi mountain. The Prophet said Bismillah, and the ship stopped moving. After traveling for more than 150 days, their journey had finally come to an end. The Prophet released all the animals, birds, and insects first into the land. They went out and populated the earth back again. The Prophet and the other Muslims came out of the ship, and the first thing he did was to put his forehead to the ground in prostration, and that was a new beginning of a human race. That was such a great story, Baba. Mashallah, I'm glad you like it, my son. Now, shall I ask you a few questions from the story? Yes, Baba. Alright, then tell me, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send Prophet Nuh alayhi salam to earth? He sent the Prophet to call people back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's correct, my son. But now, for the next question, why did the people did not listen to the words of the prophet? The people on earth thought the prophet was lying to them. They thought the prophet was another man like them. Very good, Amir. Can you tell me who boarded the ship along the prophet's family? I know the answer. The Muslim boarded the ships too. The animals, the birds, and the insect boarded the ship in pairs as well. That's correct again. Now tell me for the final question. The name of the mountain where the ship finally landed, was it? It was Jodi Mountain, right, Baba? Yes, you are right, my son. Mashallah, you gave me all the right answers. Thank you, Baba. Alright, that's for all today. I will tell you another story another time.